The rain in Port Briar didn't fall, it attacked. It was a cold, driving assault that hammered the pavement, turning the city's neon signs into blurred watercolors on the black canvas of the streets. Lila Moreno ran through it, one arm clamped around the precious, warm weight of her 8-month-old son, the other clutching the strap of a diaper bag that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. She was 24 years old, and she felt ancient. The smell of the night was a thick mix of wet asphalt, old milk, and the faint, sweet, sour tang of the diaper tucked securely against her chest. Jonah, bless his heart, was asleep. His face nestled into the dry patch of her coat, but his warmth was a ticking clock. Any moment he could wake up, hungry, wet, or just plain angry at the weather. The heels of her sensible, worn-out shoes made a desperate thwack, thwack, thwack on the sidewalk. She was late. Of course she was late. Her babysitter, a college girl who usually swore by her reliability, had canceled 20 minutes before Lila was supposed to leave. A family emergency, she had texted, which Lila knew was code for a better offer. It left Lila with two options: cancel the blind date her best friend, Maria, had spent a month setting up, or this. She had chosen this. Her thumb had trembled over the phone screen as she sent the text, the message feeling heavier than the diaper bag. Hey, so sorry, running late, and my sitter just bailed. I have to bring my son. I can totally cancel. Please let me know. Sorry, I brought my baby. The reply had come back almost instantly. Don't cancel. The reservation is solid. See you soon. No anger, no annoyance, just acceptance. It had puzzled her more than a cancellation would have. Now, she stood in front of the Tide in Time. It was not the kind of place Lila frequented. It was all dark wood, polished brass, and glowing amber light that spilled onto the wet sidewalk. It was a seafood restaurant and lounge, the kind of place where men wore expensive watches and women laughed without being too loud. Through the window, she could see a haze of warmth, hear the muted, throaty moan of a saxophone. Lila took a deep breath, adjusted Jonah, and pushed the heavy oak door open. A wave of warm air, smelling of garlic, butter, and old wine, washed over her. The jazz was louder here, a husky, soulful sound that seemed to curl around the furniture. A hostess looked up, her polite smile faltering for just a fraction of a second as she took in Lila's damp coat, the sleeping baby, and the stressed-out frizz of her hair. "Hi," Lila whispered. "I'm here to meet a blind date for Vascari." The hostess's smile snapped back into place, brighter this time. "Of course. Miss Moreno, Mr. Vascari is waiting, right this way." She was led past the glowing bar, past tables of laughing couples, toward a secluded corner booth. The man sitting there rose as she approached. He was not what she expected. Maria had said he owns some restaurants and he's nice. This man was something else. He was tall, maybe 32, and wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her last 3 months' rent. It fit him perfectly. A tailored second skin over a frame that looked both lean and powerful. His black hair was meticulously styled, and as he stepped into the light, she saw the faint, dark teal tracings of a tattoo peeking from under the cuff of his stark white shirt. But it was his eyes that held her. They were dark, almost black, and they looked at her with an intensity that was neither kind nor unkind. It was the sharp, assessing gaze of a hawk, a look that seemed to peel back her damp coat and her frazzled excuses and see the bone-deep exhaustion beneath. "Miss Moreno," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth as the jazz music. "Lila, please," she managed, clutching Jonah a little tighter. The baby stirred, making a little snuffing sound. "Mr. Vascari, I am so sorry. My sitter canceled, and This is Jonah." She felt the blush rising from her neck. "I completely understand if you want to call this off. I'm sorry. I brought my baby." The man's sharp gaze moved from her face to the small, bundled-up baby in her arms. The intensity didn't lessen, But something else joined it, a softening at the edges of his mouth. He didn't just look, he observed. Then Silas Viscari smiled. It wasn't a wide, flashy smile. It was a small, contained lift of one corner of his mouth, but it completely changed his face. The danger receded, replaced by a surprising, genuine warmth that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Lila," he said, the name sounding perfect in his voice. "He's our first chaperone for the evening. Please, sit." He gestured to the booth, and as she slid in, he didn't sit immediately. He waited, watching as she settled Jonah into the nook of her arm, propping the diaper bag beside her. Only when she was settled did he retake his seat. The anxiety that had been a tight knot in her chest for the last hour began to unspool. Just a little. Nice, Maria had said. This was more than nice. This was graceful. She still couldn't shake the feeling that he was out of place, that a man who looked like he could command armies was sitting across from a part-time accountant and her infant. Just as the waiter approached, Jonah, sensing the shift, let out a fussy noise and his little hand flailed, knocking his pacifier from his mouth. It bounced off Lila's coat and onto the plush velvet of the seat. "Oh, goodness," Lila mumbled, fumbling for it. Before her hand was halfway there, Silas's was. His movement was impossibly fast, a blur of charcoal gray and white cuff. He didn't just grab it, he intercepted it mid-bounce. He held it up, inspecting it. Lila was about to say, "I have wipes," but he was already signaling the waiter, not with a shout, but with a simple, almost invisible lift of his chin. The waiter was at his side instantly. "A glass of hot water, please. And your finest linen napkin," Silas said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. The waiter, who had been ignoring Lila, nodded. "Yes, Mr. Viscari." When the items arrived, Silas dipped the pacifier into the steaming water. Then he took the absurdly thick cotton napkin, the restaurant's best, monogrammed with a T&T, and dried it with meticulous care. He didn't wipe it, he polished it, as if it were a piece of silver. He handed it back to her, handle first. "A bit cleaner, I hope." Lila took it, her fingers brushing his. His skin was warm, his grip firm. "Thank you," she said, her voice breathy. It was the strangest, most thoughtful gesture. As she settled Jonah, who was now happily sucking on his clean pacifier, Silas's gaze drifted past her, toward the rain-streaked window. Lila almost missed it, the flicker of his eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. His smile was gone, replaced by that razor-sharp stillness. Lila turned her head slightly to see what he was looking at. A man, huddled under a failing umbrella, was walking past the restaurant. But he wasn't just walking. He was holding a phone, or maybe a camera, and he aimed it directly at their table. A flash went off, hidden in the glare of the rain. Silas frowned. He lifted one hand, not looking away from the window, and made a small, casual gesture, a slight roll of his fingers, like he was brushing away a crumb. Across the room, a large man who Lila had assumed was a bouncer, and who was also wearing a suit, met Silas's gaze and nodded once. He moved from his post at the door, not toward them, but toward a different, empty table by a wall, changing his position, his air. The man with the camera hurried away, disappearing into the Port Briar night. The moment of tension was thick, then it was gone. Silas turned back to her, the warm, polite host once more. "Now," he said, "tell me about Jonah's chaperone duties. Does he have a curfew?" Lila laughed, a real, genuine laugh, but as she did, her gaze fell on the hostess stand near the entrance. On it sat a small acrylic donation box. The logo on it was bright blue and white, the Harbor Light Foundation. A cold spike of dread, colder than the rain outside, shot through Lila's chest. It was the foundation that funded the Lantern Key Community Center, the place she worked as a part-time accountant. She had spent all morning staring at their ledgers. She had been the one, just 6 hours ago, to flag 3 separate wire transfers, all for unusually large, round numbers, going to an offshore account she had never seen before. She had put a red sticky note on the file for her boss, her hand shaking slightly. It had felt wrong. And now, sitting across from a man who commanded a room without raising his voice, who had tattoos under his suit and a gaze that missed nothing, Lila Moreno felt the delicate, fragile line of her life pull taut, the line between a blind date and something else entirely, something dangerous, was just about to snap. The waiter, having witnessed the pacifier incident, treated Lila with a new, deferential respect. He brought her a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lime without her asking. "Maria mentioned you work in accounting," Silas said, his voice easily cutting through the low hum of the restaurant. He leaned forward slightly, creating an intimate space in the public booth. "She said you're the most organized person she knows." Lila felt a flush of pride, quickly followed by her usual self-deprecation. "That just means I'm good at worrying about numbers. I work at the Lantern Key Community Center, part-time, mostly handling their donations and grants." She glanced at Jonah, now batting at the light reflected on the spoon. "It's steady, and steady is good when you're a single mom. I really hate debt, or any kind of legal trouble." She said the last words with a sudden vehemence that surprised even her. It was the core truth of her life. She lived on a razor's edge of solvency, and her greatest fear was falling off. "Order is a valuable commodity," Silas said, nodding slowly, as if she had said something profound. "Not many people appreciate the beauty of a balanced sheet." "And you?" Lila asked, feeling bolder. "Maria was a little vague. She said you're in the restaurant business." Silas paused, picking up his own water glass. "Something like that. I manage seafood logistics for most of the wharf, and—" He looked at her, that small smile returning. "I solve problems." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that stop the seafood from getting to the table," he said smoothly. Just then, Jonah, who had been quiet, let out a distinct, happy sound. Da-da-da-da. Lila froze. "Oh, no, sweetie, we're not... He's just making sounds," she stammered, her face burning. But Silas's expression had changed. The assessing, sharp edge was gone, replaced by something warm and unguarded. His eyes, fixed on Jonah, lit up with genuine delight. "He's got a strong voice," Silas said, his tone soft. "A future problem solver himself." Lila watched him, bewildered. This man of contradictions, dangerous suit, gentle eyes, fast reflexes was being charmed by her 8-month-old. As he held her gaze, there was a subtle commotion outside. Lila barely registered it, but the man who had been at the door, the one Silas had signaled, stepped outside. There was a brief, muffled scuffle, obscured by the rain and a passing bus. Then, quiet. The man with the camera was gone. The bouncer, if that's what he was, returned to his post inside, his suit jacket perfectly straight, his face impassive. Silas's attention had never left her. He seemed entirely unconcerned with the events outside, as if he had ordered a car and it had simply arrived. He reached for the wine bottle the waiter had left chilling in a bucket, but instead of pouring the deep red liquid, he picked up the carafe of water. He refilled her glass first, a steady, controlled pour. Only after her glass was full did he pour his own wine. It was a gesture of protection, prioritizing her clarity over his own indulgence. "So," he said, setting the carafe down, "you're a self-taught accountant who hates legal trouble. What else?" The question was direct, but his voice made it sound like an invitation. Lila found herself talking. She told him about leaving her small hometown, about studying for her certifications online while Jonah slept. She admitted her weaknesses for soul music and cinnamon rolls. He listened. He actually listened, his head tilted, his focus entirely on her. When she finished, rambling about her favorite bakery, she stopped, embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm not very interesting." "I disagree," Silas said. He swirled the wine in his glass. "I like the order of a balance sheet, but I also appreciate the chaos of the ocean. It seems you understand both." As he spoke, Jonah sneezed, a tiny explosive sound that sent a spray of mist over the table. "Oh, Jonah," Lila cried, grabbing for a napkin from the dispenser. At the same instant, Silas reached for the thick linen one by his plate. Their hands met over the center of the table, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. It was like a small, static shock, a sudden, sharp jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the restaurant's heating. His skin was smooth, his touch light but definite. Lila's heart did a strange flip-flop, a flutter she had not felt in a very, very long time. She pulled her hand back as if burned, clutching the flimsy paper napkin. "Sorry." "My fault," he said, his voice a fraction lower, but he did not pull his hand back. He left it on the table, palm up, a silent offering. Before she could process the gesture, her phone, lying screen down on the diaper bag, buzzed insistently. A text, then another. "Excuse me," she murmured, turning it over. It was an automated email alert from her work system. Subject: abnormal activity. Harbor Light Foundation. Her stomach plummeted. It was about the files she had flagged. She quickly opened the email, her eyes scanning the technical jargon. Multiple transfers exceeding daily limit. Unauthorized routing. Account number 774G. She was so focused, she did not notice that Silas had shifted. He was not looking at her phone. He was looking at the dark, reflective surface of the wine in his glass, which, from his angle, provided a perfect, distorted mirror of her phone screen. He saw the words Harbor Light and 774G. His face remained a mask of polite interest, but inside, a steel door slammed shut. He recognized that account number. It was not his. It was a primary washing route for the Rourke outfit, the syndicate he was in a cold, quiet war with. They were sloppy, and now, apparently, they were active in his city, using a community center foundation as cover. And the woman across from him, the one with the tired eyes and the scent of cinnamon, had just found it. The tension he had dismissed at the window snapped back, sharp and deadly. The man with the camera, the flagged account, it was not a coincidence. Lila looked up, her face pale, the earlier warmth replaced by a familiar, hunted anxiety. "Work emergency, sorry." Silas saw her fear. He knew, with chilling certainty, that it was justified. He also knew he could not let her see his... He immediately broke the tension. He smiled at Jonah. "Mr. Chaperone," he said, his voice light and playful again. He picked up his clean, heavy linen napkin, unfolded it, and with a few deft, practiced twists, created a standing, tent-like structure. He placed it in front of the baby, a fortress, he declared, to protect us from abnormal activity. Jonah gurgled and swiped at it, knocking it over. The whole table and Lila burst into laughter. The sound was a relief, washing away the cold dread of the email. Lila looked at Silas, this man who could build napkin forts and command waiters, and she was suddenly sure, handle men with cameras. Maria was wrong. He was not just nice, and he was not just in the restaurant business. Her intuition screamed that this man was dangerous. But the way he looked at her son, it made her feel, for the first time in a year, completely safe. As Lila was refolding the napkin, Silas's own phone, dark and unmarked, vibrated silently in his suit pocket. He slipped his hand in, his gaze never leaving her, and his thumb unlocked the screen. A single, encrypted message waited. It was from his head of security, the man who had been at the door. "Rourke is hunting the auditor. They think they work at Lantern Key." Silas's blood ran cold. He looked at Lila, who was now explaining to Jonah why he could not eat the napkin. The auditor, the person who worries about numbers, the one who hated legal trouble. She was not just a blind date, she was a target, and he was the only thing standing in the way. The dinner ended faster than it began. Silas paid the bill with a quiet word to the waiter, his eyes never leaving the restaurant's entrance. He helped Lila with her coat, his hands brushing her shoulders, and then expertly settled Jonah into her arms, ensuring the baby was secure and warm against the rain. "We'll use the side exit," he said, his voice calm, but the warmth from the booth was gone, replaced by a cool, decisive efficiency. He guided her not toward the heavy front door, but down a narrow, wood-paneled hallway past the kitchens. The smell of garlic was replaced by the damp chill of the alley. A woman was waiting by the steel exit door. She was tall, with sharp features and hair pulled back in a severe, functional knot. She held a large, black umbrella. "This is Mira Dax," Silas said simply, as if introducing a colleague. Mira nodded once at Lila, her eyes scanning the alley, the rooftops, and the street beyond. She held the umbrella over Lila and Jonah, stepping slightly in front of them as Silas emerged. They had taken no more than 3 steps onto the wet pavement when it happened. A black sport utility vehicle, its headlights off, slid to a halt at the mouth of the alley, blocking their path to the main street. It was silent. A huge, menacing shadow against the city lights. Lila's heart seized. She pulled Jonah tighter, her body instinctively turning to shield him. Then, the rear window of the SUV lowered. A small, precise, red dot of light appeared, dancing on the wet brick wall just inches from Lila's head. It was not a gunshot. It was a message. "We see you. We know who you're with." Before Lila could even gasp, Mira Dax moved. She was not a person. She was a function. In one fluid motion, she spun, using her own body and the heavy-duty umbrella as a shield, pushing Lila and Jonah back against Silas. "Sir, alley north," Mira snapped, her voice devoid of panic. "Now," Silas said, his hand clamping on Lila's arm. He did not run. He pulled her, fast and firm, away from the street, deeper into the dark, narrow alley. Lila stumbled, her shoes slipping on the wet cobblestones. Behind them, she heard the SUV's doors open, the heavy thud of boots hitting the ground. A piercing shriek filled the air, the midnight freight train crossing the Port Briar Inlet. The sound was deafening, a roar of metal and horn that vibrated in Lila's teeth. It perfectly masked the sound of their pursuers. Silas did not slow. He dragged her toward a dead end, a sheer brick wall slick with grime. "Here," he commanded. "It's a wall," Lila cried, her voice thin with terror. Silas ignored her. He shoved aside a stack of empty fish crates, revealing a steel plate, rusted and unremarkable. His fingers found a near-invisible seam. He pulled. A section of the wall, no bigger than a door, swung inward with a groan of oiled hinges, opening onto perfect blackness. He pushed her inside. "Mira, rear guard," he ordered. Mira was right behind them, collapsing the umbrella and drawing a small, dark object from her coat. The door hissed shut, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. Lila was shaking, hyperventilating. Jonah, startled by the sudden movement and the cold, began to wail. "Where are we? Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. She felt trapped, the darkness pressing in. A click and a low, battery-powered light hummed to life, illuminating a narrow, concrete tunnel. It smelled of brine and damp earth. Silas turned to face her. His suit was immaculate. His face was calm, but his eyes were like chips of black ice. "I am the man," he said, his voice low and steady over Jonah's cries, "who is going to make sure your son sleeps safely tonight." The sheer, unwavering certainty of his words cut through her panic. He did not wait for a reply. He turned and walked down the tunnel, expecting her to follow. She did. After 100 yards, they reached another steel door. He unlocked it, leading them into a small, sterile room. It looked like a storm bunker concrete walls, a cot, and a counter stocked with emergency supplies. Jonah's cries were now full-blown, hungry shrieks. "I need to... his bottle..." Layla fumbled in the diaper bag, her hands trembling so badly she dropped the plastic bottle. Silas picked it up. "Formula." "Yes, in the blue can. It has to be warm water, not hot, and..." Silas had already located the bottled water in a small plug-in kettle. He poured a precise amount of water, heated it, and then, to her astonishment, he tapped a small amount onto his wrist to test the temperature. He held the bottle, scooped exactly 2 level scoops of formula, and swirled it. Not shook, swirled, the way you were supposed to avoid bubbles. Lila stared, her mouth open. He did it with the practiced, efficient, and gentle economy of motion of an experienced parent. "You've done that before," she whispered. "My niece," he said, not looking up. "She's 3 now, but she was a tyrant about her formula." He tested the temperature on his wrist one more time, then offered the bottle to Lila. As she took it, Mira Dax entered the bunker, shutting the door. She was holding a tablet. "Their Rourke outfit," Mira said, her voice all business. "They're not subtle. They were waiting for you at your apartment. The man with the camera at the restaurant confirmed your identity. They're scrubbing the area for you now." She turned the tablet toward Lila. It showed a grainy, satellite view image of the street outside Lantern Key. A small, red circle was drawn around a figure her leaving the building earlier that day. "Rourke is liquidating," Mira continued, "but his offshore accounts are frozen. He's using the Harbor Light Foundation as a temporary funnel. He found out, somehow, that an internal auditor flagged the transfers this afternoon. He's looking for that auditor." Lila sank onto the cot, her legs giving out. Jonah was finally, blessedly drinking. "Me," she whispered. "He's looking for me." "Yes," Silas said. He crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes were no longer icy, but filled with a focused, heavy gravity. "Lila, you cannot go home. You cannot go to Maria's. You cannot be anywhere they expect. I have a house. It's on Seabreak Hill. It's isolated, and it's secure. I am taking you and Jonah there tonight." Her first instinct was a flare of defiant pride. "I am not going anywhere with you. I don't even know you. This is insane." "They put a laser on your son's head," Silas said, his voice flat, brutal, and true. "This is not a negotiation. This is survival. You hate legal trouble. Lila, the men hunting you are the law in this part of the city. You cannot fight them, but I can." She looked from his unyielding face to Jonah's small, vulnerable head. He was right. Her pride was a luxury she could not afford. Her son's life was the only currency that mattered. "Okay," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll go, but on one condition." "Name it?" "No more lies. You tell me everything. You tell me who you are." Silas held her gaze for a long, heavy moment. "I am Silas Viscari. My family. We have interests in Port Briar. Rourke is my enemy. By flagging those numbers, you became his target, and that makes you my responsibility." He stood. "I accept your condition. Now, I have one of mine." "What?" "When I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to be quiet, you are silent. When I say now, you do exactly as I say without hesitation. Your life, and Jonah's, may depend on it. Do you agree?" "Yes," she breathed. The drive was a blur. They exited the bunker into a different, secure underground garage. The car was not a modern, armored truck. It was a vintage coupe, dark green, low-slung, and beautiful. It was also, Lila suspected, faster and safer than a tank. Silas drove, his movements on the wheel and gears fluid and economical. Jonah, full and warm, slept in his car seat, which Silas had transferred and secured himself. As they sped over the long, arched bridge leaving the city center, the air changed. The smell of asphalt was gone, replaced by the sharp, clean bite of sea salt. Lila looked at the man beside her. In the dashboard's green glow, his face was a mask of cold concentration, his grip on the wheel steady. He was, she realized, completely at home in this chaos. At the far end of the bridge, a single, bright headlight appeared, blocking the exit ramp, a motorcycle. The rider, clad in black, sat astride the machine, waiting. Silas did not slow down. Lila tensed, her hand flying to Jonah's seat. "Silas!" "It's being handled." he said. Suddenly, a black car, a sedan, not the SUV that Lila had not even realized was behind them, accelerated. It surged past Silas's coupe, its engine roaring. It was Mira. She did not ram the motorcycle. It was more elegant, more brutal. Mira swerved, her headlights flashing to full, blinding high beams. She slammed her brakes, turning the sedan sideways, a perfect, tactical block. The motorcyclist, blinded and cut off, was forced to ditch his bike, skidding onto the grass shoulder in a spray of gravel. Silas never touched his brake. He accelerated through the gap Mira had created, the coupe's engine thundering as they left the bridge and climbed the dark hill toward the sea. The Sea Break House was not a bunker. It was the opposite. It was a structure of dark, aromatic wood and sheer glass, cantilevered over a jagged cliff. The entire western wall was a single, immense pane, offering a terrifying and beautiful view of the black, churning Atlantic. The only sound was the deep, rhythmic crash of waves on the rocks below, a steady metronome for Lila's chaotic, racing heart. The air was cold and clean, smelling of pine and salt. Silas entered a minimalist bedroom and returned with a sleek, high-end travel cot, which he assembled in seconds. Lila, moving with an automaton's precision, gently placed the sleeping Jonah inside, pulling a soft cashmere throw blanket over his small body. The domestic, gentle act felt bizarre, a scene from a life that was not hers, performed after a high-speed, tactical escape. She watched her son breathe for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then she stood, her back straight, and turned to face Silas. He was watching her, not the baby. His expensive suit jacket still buttoned, his posture relaxed but radiating energy. Her fear, which had been a cold, paralyzing knot, had finally been burned away by adrenaline. All that was left was a hard, cold anger. "My condition," she said, her voice low and steady. "You said you'd tell me everything." He nodded, accepting the summons. "You're not in the seafood business," she stated. It was not a question. Silas did not try to evade, deny, or charm his way out. He walked to the glass wall, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the dark, violent water. "No," he said, "I am not. I am—" He paused, as if choosing his next words with surgical precision. "My name, as you know, is Silas Viscari. I am the head of the Viscari Syndicate." Lila's blood ran cold. Syndicate? She'd read about them in the Briar Beacon. The Mafia. The papers treated them like a modern myth, a boogeyman for the city's waterfront. You're a criminal," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "My father was," Silas corrected, turning to face her. His expression was unreadable. Not apology, just fact. He built an empire on disorganized crime, smuggling, protection, gambling. When he died 2 years ago, I took it over. He straightened the cuffs of his white shirt. "But my strategy is different. I am taking the Viscari assets, the shipping lines, the warehouses, the port access, and I am legitimizing them. I am turning an empire into a corporation. Port Briar is changing, and I am changing with it. I am trying to build something clean." "Then who?" Lila asked, her voice shaking. "Is Kellen Rourke?" Silas's face hardened, the polite mask dropping to reveal the steel beneath. "Kellen Rourke is the past. He runs the Rourke outfit. He thrives on the chaos I am trying to eliminate. He's old school. All guns and leverage. He wants my ports. He wants my territory. And he doesn't care who he has to burn to get it." "And the Harbor Light Foundation," Lila pressed, her mind racing back to the email. "The logo in your restaurant." "A front," Silas said, his voice laced with contempt. "The restaurant and dozens of others are forced to host their donation boxes. It's a protection racket disguised as charity. Rourke is partners with corrupt officials in the local branch of the Federal Commerce Security Bureau, the FCSB." He saw her confusion. "It's a manufactured agency, Lila, a glorified task force with federal-sounding names, created by the mayor's office to oversee port commerce. They provide the federal cover. Rourke provides the muscle, and the Harbor Light Foundation washes the money they skim from every city contract on the waterfront. Lila sank onto the edge of the leather sofa, her legs giving out. The Lantern Key Center. It's being used. The grants they give us are dirty, Silas finished, his voice gentle but unsparing. And the audit you just prepared, the files you flagged this afternoon, that is the only physical evidence that connects Rourke Street money directly to the FCSB's fraudulent bookkeeping. You didn't just find an accounting error. Lila, you found the blueprint to their entire operation. He moved across the room and crouched in front of her, his proximity overwhelming. His dark eyes locked on hers. You touched their books. Now, they will do anything to touch you, to silence you, permanently. Why protect me, she whispered, the question torn from her. Tears of terror and rage welled in her eyes. Why not just let them? It would solve a problem for you. His gaze was unwavering, intense, and shockingly sincere. Because I don't like bullies, and because I like people who try to keep things right. You saw something wrong, and you put a red flag on it. You did your job. A new thought, sharp and terrible, pierced through Lila's fog. A letter she had received 2 months ago, on thick, creamy stationery. The Harbor Light Foundation is pleased to award you an Emerging Scholars Grant for your son, Jonah. It was $500. It had paid for Jonah's new crib and a month's worth of premium diapers. She felt sick, a wave of profound, burning humiliation, hotter than her fear, washed over her. They had paid for her son's crib with their stolen, bloody money. They had marked her. Her head snapped up. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold fury that matched his. They used us, she said, her voice shaking with a new, hard strength. They used my community center, and they used my son. She stood up, meeting his gaze. I'm not going to run. I'll help you. I'll help you expose every last one of them. I know where the rest of the paper records are, the ones not on the server. Silas stared at her for a long moment. Seeing the shift, the fear was gone, and in its place was a woman he recognized, a fighter. He gave a single, slow nod of respect. It was only then he noticed her hair, still dark and damp from the run through the rain. Her shoulders were trembling, but not from fear anymore. It was from the cold. He turned, walked to a linen closet, and pulled out a thick, music-themed cotton towel. He did not speak. He walked up behind her, and before she could react, he gently draped the towel over her head. Lila froze. His large, warm hands came up, and through the thick towel, he began to gently, methodically dry her hair. His movements were slow, almost impersonal, yet overwhelmingly intimate. She could feel the solid warmth of his body behind her, a living shield. His fingers, firm and sure, massaged her scalp through the cotton, chasing away the cold. You're shaking, he murmured, his voice a low vibration close to her ear. I'm angry, she whispered, closing her eyes, allowing herself this one strange moment of comfort. He stopped, his hands resting on her shoulders through the towel. She turned in the circle of his arms, the towel falling into her hands. They were closer now, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his chest, to see the dark, complex flecks in his eyes. The air between them grew thick, heavy, charged with the adrenaline of the chase and this new, dangerous proximity. The sound of the ocean faded. All she could hear was her own pulse. His gaze dropped to her mouth. The banked heat she had seen earlier was now a low, simmering fire. He leaned in, just a fraction of an inch. The front door of the safe house opened, and the cold, salty air swirled in, breaking the spell. Mira Dax stood in the doorway, her boots quiet on the hardwood floor. Her face was a mask of grim urgency. We have a problem, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Silas stepped back from Lila instantly, the shift from protector to boss absolute. What? The motorcyclist on the bridge, Mira said, pulling off her gloves. He wasn't Rourke's. He was PBOCD, Port Briar Organized Crime Directorate. He was following me. Silas processed this in a split second. A mole. A mole, Mira confirmed. The local police know you're not at your penthouse. They know my sedan left the city. They will ping this location within the hour. She looked at Lila, then back at Silas. The Seabrake house is burned. Lila's heart, which had just started to slow, was hammering against her ribs again. So we run again. Silas was already in motion, grabbing a black duffel bag from the closet. We don't run. We move. Mira, get the paper kite ready for launch. We leave in 10. He turned to Lila, his face hard with new purpose. Rourke thinks you're a liability to be erased. He doesn't know you're now a weapon. What's the plan? Lila asked, her voice tight, as she moved to Jonah's cot. They want the auditor. We'll give them one, Silas said, his eyes like polished obsidian. But first, we're going to make a trade. They want your files. We're going to take theirs. All of them. Tomorrow night, then, you and Jonah disappear. We take you to the paper kite. It's a safe boat. You'll be gone before Rourke even knows what hit him. The 10 minutes had stretched into an hour. The paper kite was not ready, and Mira had determined the immediate perimeter was, for the moment, clear. The mole at the PBOCD knew the location, but they did not know the timing. Silas had made the call they would wait for the cover of the deepest night, just before dawn, to move to the boat. For now, they were suspended in a strange, borrowed calm, prisoners in a glass house on a cliff. Jonah was asleep in the travel cot, moved to the most secure, windowless room in the house, a large, walk-in pantry converted by Silas's security. Lila and Silas sat on the covered porch, a deep overhang of dark wood that protected them from the wind. The air was sharp with the smell of pine trees and the cold, heavy scent of the ocean. Below them, the waves crashed relentlessly, a white noise of immense power. A single, Klieg light in the yard illuminated a swath of churning water, the air, the sounds, the isolation. It wrapped around them like a thick, woolen blanket. They sat in silence for a long time. Lila bundled in the cashmere throw, Silas in his suit jacket, seemingly impervious to the cold. My mother was a seamstress, Lila said, her voice quiet, almost stolen by the wind. She used to say you could fix anything with a strong needle and a hot iron. She smiled, a sad, faint expression. I don't think she ever met a problem like Kellen Rourke. Silas watched the ocean, his profile like something carved from the cliffside. I was raised with the rule of silence, he said, his voice a low rumble. We didn't talk about problems. We didn't talk about business. We didn't talk about feelings. He turned his head, his dark eyes finding hers in the gloom. I never had a real birthday party. My father thought celebrations were a liability, a weakness. Lila absorbed that, a boy with no birthdays, a man who now ran an empire, who knew how to test a baby's bottle and build a napkin fortress. The contradictions of him were dizzying. Her own vulnerability, the one she kept locked away, suddenly pushed to the surface. I'm always so afraid, she whispered, her voice trembling. Of that. Of being a liability. It's what people think when they see me. You know. She clutched the blanket tighter. A troublesome single mother. Someone who comes with baggage. Someone who needs saving. I saw it on your face in the restaurant. Before you smiled. No, Silas said, his voice firm, cutting through her confession. That's not what I saw. He turned on the wooden bench, facing her. He lifted his hand, large and warm, and held it, palm up, in the space between them. He did not touch her. He waited. When her trembling gaze met his eyes were asking a clear, simple question. Lila hesitated, her heart hammering. Then, slowly, she uncurled her fingers from the blanket and rested the back of her hand against his palm. His fingers closed over hers, not a grab, but a slow, firm, incredibly gentle pressure. His thumb stroked the back of her hand once, a simple, grounding touch that sent a jolt of pure, clean warmth up her arm. I saw a fighter, he said, his voice now a velvet growl, who was exhausted from fighting alone. The space between them was electric, the sound of the waves, the cold air, his warm hand, it all focused into a single, sharp point of sensation. He was not looking at her with pity, but with a fierce, burning recognition. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth. He was still asking. Lila made the final choice. She did not lean in, but she did not pull away. She closed her eyes. The kiss began as a small promise. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the night's chase. It was a discovery. His lips were soft, hesitant, brushing against hers once, a test. She breathed in, and her lips parted slightly. He took that as his answer. He kissed her again, this time with a deep, seeking pressure. It was a kiss of profound, staggering relief. Lila's hand came up, not to push him away, but to steady herself, her fingers resting on the hard muscle of his shoulder. His other hand moved to the nape of her neck, his fingers threading into the base of her hair, not to pull, but to support, to hold her. She could feel the warmth of his chest through his suit, the steady, solid beat of his heart under her hand, a rhythm that was just as fast as hers. She felt his breath, warm and even as it mingled with her own. She responded with a sweet, quiet strength, a yielding that was its own kind of power. After so many months of being only a mother, of being a survivor, she let herself, for one small, perfect moment, just be a woman who was wanted. A small sound came from the baby monitor Silas had placed on the table beside them. A sigh, a single, sleepy-sounding eh. Jonah was turning over in his sleep. Instantly, Silas pulled back. He was the first to break the contact, though his hand remained a warm weight on her neck. He looked toward the monitor, and the intense, focused man was replaced by the one who had built the napkin fort. A small, amused smile touched his lips. "The chaperone," he murmured, his voice thick, "is waking up for his shift." Lila let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. She did not pull away. Instead, she rested her forehead against his, a gesture of pure, trusting intimacy. The dark stubble on his jaw was rough against her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes still closed. He stiffened slightly. "For what?" "For stopping, at the right time." The tension in his shoulders seemed to uncoil. He had heard what she was truly saying, that he respected her, that he respected her role as a mother. He understood the boundary. His hand slid from her neck to her shoulder, and he pulled her into a hug. It was not a sexual embrace. It was a fortification. He wrapped both arms around her, pulling her close against his chest. She buried her face in the hollow of his neck, breathing in the scent of his skin. Clean soap and something metallic and sharp, like the sea air itself. They sat like that for a long time, two hearts beating against each other, saying everything they could not risk putting into words. Finally, Lila pulled back, just enough to look at him. The fire in his eyes was banked, but it was still there, a steady, warm coal. "Silas," she said, her voice clear, all trembling gone, if we move forward, it has to be on a path with light. I cannot bring Jonah into any more shadows. I cannot be your secret or your liability." Silas looked at her, his expression serious. He raised his hand, the one that had held hers, and gently, with one finger, he brushed a stray piece of hair back from her face. "Lila," he said, his voice a low, solemn vow, "I will hang the lights along the way. Far out on the horizon, beyond the cliff, beyond the waves, a single white light from a container ship flashed once, twice, in the darkness. It was a warning of the dawn and of the storm that was coming with it. The Mariners Club on Pier 7 was the beating heart of old Port Briar's corruption. Tonight, it was hosting the Harbor Light Foundation's annual charity gala, and the entire room glittered with stolen money and false virtue. Lila Moreno moved through the crowd, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. She wore a simple, severe black dress, a headset, and a clipboard, her entire identity reduced to event staff. Silas had procured the credentials through a catering company his syndicate advised. She looked the part invisible, stressed, and efficient. Silas himself was across the room, a stark, commanding figure in a black tuxedo. He played the part of a major port donor, laughing with a city councilman, his eyes never staying on one place for more than a second. Mira, in the uniform of the club's private security, patrolled the perimeter, a silent, watchful shadow. And Jonah. The thought of him was a sharp, painful ache. He was miles away, on the paper kite, a sleek, dark-hulled cabin cruiser, being watched by Piper, a Vescari operative who was also, Silas had assured her, a registered pediatric nurse. The separation felt like a missing limb. It was all the motivation she needed. The plan was a whisper in her ear, delivered by Silas in the back of a dark van 20 minutes earlier. The ledgers are not in the main safe. Rourke keeps a shadow office on the 3rd floor, disguised as the club's accounting department. You have a 7-minute window, from the moment the diversion starts until we hit the water. Her target, a small office overlooking the main ballroom. The escape route, a rear cargo elevator, which Silas would unlock remotely. It led down, not to the street, but to the pier's understructure, a dark maze of damp pylons and wooden beams. A small, inflatable rubber boat would be waiting, piloted by Mira. Lila checked her watch, 10:04 p.m. She nodded once, a tiny gesture, toward Mira. Mira, seeing it, touched her earpiece and began moving toward the main electrical room. Lila turned and walked, not ran, toward the staff-only staircase. She climbed to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in a thick, gaudy red. She found the door, accounts. It was locked, as Silas had instructed. She didn't try the handle. She simply stood, her back to the wall, and waited. She heard Silas's voice from the ballroom below, suddenly amplified by the PA system. He was on stage, announced as a new major donor. The Harbor Light Foundation, his voice boomed, smooth and confident, represents the very best of Port Briar's commitment to, He was the diversion. Lila pressed her ear to the office door. She heard movement inside. A man grumbled, "He's on. Go see what he wants." A door opened, and she heard heavy footsteps moving away from her, toward a different exit. Lila slid a Vescari-supplied keycard into the lock. It clicked green. She slipped inside. The room was a fake, a desk, a dead computer, dusty file cabinets, but on the far wall, a framed painting of a ship was slightly ajar. Behind it, a keypad. She entered the code Silas had given her the date of the city's founding. A small safe opened. Inside, there was no cash, just a slim, encrypted hard drive and a single, thick file folder. She grabbed them. The folder was sealed with a vivid, waxy red stamp she did not recognize, ECIC Eastern Corridor Integrity Commission. It looked official, federal, and utterly terrifying. She shoved both into the hidden, slim pocket inside her dress, replacing them with the dummy hard drive and blank file she carried. She was closing the safe when a new voice, impossibly smooth and polite, spoke from the doorway. "I do hope you're finding our records satisfactory." Lila froze. She turned slowly. Kellen Rourke stood leaning against the door jamb. He was older than Silas, perhaps in his late 40s, with silvering hair and the gentle, concerned face of a countryside priest. He wore a tuxedo, but no tie, his collar open. "We try to be so transparent," he continued, smiling. "It's what charity is all about, is it not?" He stepped into the room, his eyes the color of faded denim, crinkling at the corners. "You're from the Lantern Key Center, I believe. Such a wonderful place, doing such important work for our city's mothers." The threat was unmistakable, a velvet glove around a block of ice. He knew exactly who she was. "I was just checking the audio-visual feeds," Lila lied, her voice tight, gesturing to the dead computer. "Of course you were," Rourke said, stepping aside. "Do carry on." Lila walked past him, her body rigid, expecting a hand on her shoulder, a knife in her back, but he merely watched her go, his smile serene. As she reached the hall, he called out, his voice still light, "Give my regards to Mr. Vascari. He does throw such a spectacular party." Her legs were shaking so badly she almost fell down the stairs. She emerged into the ballroom. Silas was gone from the stage. The music, a loud, brassy jazz number, had resumed. Then she saw him. He was walking directly toward her. He did not look at her face. He did not ask if she was okay. He simply held out his hand. "They're playing our song," he said, loud enough for those around them to hear, his voice warm and amused. Before she could protest, he had swept her onto the dance floor. His hand was a steel bar at the small of her back, his other hand engulfing hers. He pulled her close. Too close for a ballroom. She was pressed against the hard, solid lines of his body. Her face just inches from his. She could smell the clean, expensive scent of his shirt. "Did you get it?" he whispered, his lips brushing her ear as he spun her in a flawless turn. "Yes," she breathed, her terror and his proximity making her dizzy. "Rourke was there. He knew me. Silas. He let me go." Silas's body tensed, his rhythm not faltering for a beat. "He's playing. He thinks he's smarter. Did he see the file?" "I don't know. I had it hidden." "Good." His hand tightened on hers. "Now listen to me. The cargo elevator is at your 5 o'clock. When I dip you, the lights go out. You have 3 seconds. You do not look back. You go." "Silas, what about you?" "I'm right behind you," he murmured, his cheek brushing her temple. His warmth was the only solid thing in a world that was tilting. He held her, and for a second, they were not a boss and an auditor. They were just a man and a woman, holding on tight. "Now," he whispered. He dipped her low, a dramatic, show-stopping move. As her back went parallel to the floor, the ballroom was plunged into total, absolute darkness. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Lila did not wait. She used his grip to spring up, tearing her hand from his, and ran. She did not look back. She shoved through the panicked, dark crowd, aiming for the exit sign. The cargo elevator doors were already sliding open as she reached them. Silas was there, right behind her, a dark shadow in the dark. He shoved her in and hit the button for the pier. The doors closed, sealing them in. They plummeted, the elevator rattling in protest. It stopped with a jarring thud. Silas wrenched the doors open, and the smell of low tide and creosote hit her. They were in the underpier, a cavern of massive, wet beams. "This way," a voice from the darkness. "Mira." She was standing in the inflatable boat, its engine idling with a low thrum. Silas threw Lila in, tumbling after her. Mira hit the throttle. As the boat shot out from under the pier and into the open, rain-swept harbor, Lila looked back. High above them, on the gala's private balcony, Kellen Rourke stood alone. He was illuminated by the light from the ballroom, which had just flickered back on. He was not shouting. He was not angry. He was clapping, a slow, methodical, mocking applause that she could not hear, but could see. Even from this distance, he had let them go. It was a move in his game. The boat slammed against the waves, cold spray hitting Lila's face, washing away the sweat. In the distance, she saw the lights of the paper kite. 10 minutes later, she was being pulled aboard the larger vessel. The first thing she saw was Jonah. He was awake, sitting in Piper's lap in the warm, dry cabin, giggling at the flashing lights of the harbor. Lila fell to her knees and pulled him into her arms, burying her face in his warm, baby powder-scented neck. She held him with one arm, her entire body shaking in relief. Silas knelt beside her. "You're safe," he said, his voice rough. Lila reached out, her hand finding his in the dark cabin. She grabbed it, her grip desperate, her knuckles white. She didn't let go. "We need to see what we've got," Mira said, her voice all business, as she fired up a rugged laptop. "The hard drive. It's encrypted." "The password," Lila said, her mind suddenly, chillingly clear. She remembered Rourke's mocking words. "It's a trap." "What is it?" Silas asked, his hand tightening on hers. Lila looked at him, her eyes wide. He's playing with us. The password. It's tied in time. Silas's face darkened. Their first meeting. Rourke was not just a step ahead. He was telling them he had been there from the very beginning. Mira's fingers flew. It's opening, but damn it, he's good. What? Silas demanded. The data is here, Mira said, her voice grim. But by accessing it, we just triggered a silent GPS tracker embedded in the decryption file. She pointed to a map. A small, red dot was pulsing on their location. He didn't let us go. Boss, he sent us on an errand, and now he knows exactly where we are. The paper kite's cabin was silent save for the rhythmic ping of the tracker on Mira's laptop and the roar of the twin engines. The hard drive was a bomb, and its timer was running. Mira's fingers flew across the keyboard, partitioning the drive, copying the files into a secure, offline server. Silas stood over her, his face a grim mask in the blue light of the screens. Lila sat on the cabin's bench, Jonah sleeping in his carrier at her feet, his small chest rising and falling in oblivious peace. He's right, Mira said, her voice tight. The data is all here. It's a clear map. The Federal Commerce Security Bureau, or what passes for it, is nothing but a private security force for Rourke. They've been skimming millions, at least 20% off the top of every port contract for 3 years. And Harbor Light, Lila whispered, her voice thick with disgust. Where does it go? Right here, Mira said, highlighting a complex flowchart. Skimmed money goes to a holding company. Then it's donated in a lump sum to the Harbor Light Foundation. From there, it's distributed. To us, Lila said, to Lantern Key, to dozens of other community programs. Not just distributed, Lila, Silas said, his voice a low growl. He pointed to a different set of folders. It's laundered. The foundation pays vastly inflated invoices to FCSB-owned contractors for services at those centers. New roofing, new computers. Work that never gets done. The money comes in dirty, goes to the centers, and comes out clean, right into Rourke's pocket. Lila felt sick. Her community, her neighbors, were being used as a human washing machine. We have to release this, she said, her voice rising. We have to send this to the Briar Beacon. To everyone. Now. No, Silas said, his voice absolute. Lila stood, her anger making her bold. No, they are hunting us. Silas, they know where we are. Rourke is playing with us. You want to wait until he sinks this boat? If you send this to the press, Silas countered, his voice dangerously quiet. Rourke will bury it. He will claim it's a forgery, a fabrication from a rival syndicate. He will paint you as a disgruntled, unstable employee, and me as a criminal trying to frame him. The FCSB will validate his story. It will be dismissed as a turf war, and the evidence will be tainted, useless. So what do? Nothing. We don't go wide, Silas said, turning from the screen to face her. We go deep. We take this to the one person in Port Briar who Rourke cannot buy, bully or bury. Commissioner Aurelia Quinn. Lila recognized the name. Aurelia Quinn was a legend, an old money reformer who ran the independent Port Briar Civic Ethics Board. She was the only person in city government who was truly feared. Aurelia Quinn, Mira affirmed, is clean, but she's a shark. She will not move unless the case is ironclad. This is ironclad, Lila insisted. It's close, Silas said, but it's missing the final link. This shows Rourke and the FCSB. It does not show why the FCSB is loyal. We need the head. We need the connection to the mayor's office. The meeting was set for 1 hour before dawn. Aurelia Quinn did not meet in offices. She met in the city's old archival library, a deconsecrated cathedral on the bluffs, its pews replaced by towering shelves of paper records. Aurelia was a woman in her late 60s, dressed in severe gray wool. Her white hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull her eyes wider. She did not waste time on pleasantries. She and Mira decrypted the files on a non-networked machine. She read in silence for 15 minutes. The only sound was the wind whistling through the stained glass windows. This is excellent, Aurelia said finally, her voice like dry paper. This proves collusion. This proves theft. This proves the FCSB is Rourke's private army. She looked up, her pale blue eyes finding Silas. But it does not prove the mayor is complicit. It shows the money going to Rourke, but not from Rourke to City Hall. Without that, I can cut off the hand, Mr. Viscari. But I cannot kill the beast. The mayor will simply appoint a new FCSB head and claim he was misled. I need the money trail to his re-election campaign. Lila's mind was racing. The digital files, the laundered invoices, but the donations. The donations, Lila said, her voice cutting the silence. Everyone turned to her. The small ones, she explained, her thoughts clarifying. The ones Harbor Light makes us collect at the center, the cash, the small checks, we keep paper records, original copies of the donation slips before they are scanned and sent to Harbor Light for processing. I was supposed to be shredding last month's batch tomorrow. Aurelia Quinn leaned forward. And where do those originals go, Miss Moreno? They're bundled, Lila said, and picked up by a campaign volunteer. I always thought it was for the mayor's food drive. But the logs, they would show the link, the paper trail, from Harbor Light to us, to the campaign. It's not digitized. It's the one thing they wouldn't have on that drive. Then that, Aurelia said, is what I need. Silas was already shaking his head. No, it's too dangerous. They're hunting you. The center will be the first place they go after your apartment. It's the only place they won't go, Lila argued, her voice desperate and strong. They think I'm here, on this boat. She pointed to the red, pulsing dot on Mira's laptop. They think they have me cornered. They'll be watching the water, not a community center at 5 a.m. I can get in, get the box, and get out. Silas stared at her, his face a mask of conflict. He saw the logic, but his every instinct screamed to protect her. He also saw the look in her eyes, the anger, the need for justice. This was not his choice to make. Fine, he said, his voice clipped. But you do not go alone. A shadow team will be on the street. Piper will stay with Jonah in the car. You will be in and out in 5 minutes, and you will take this. He handed her a small panic button. The moment you are in trouble, you text Shore Baron. It's the only code. We will be inside in 30 seconds. The Lantern Key Community Center was silent, smelling of floor wax and children's paint. Lila moved through the dark hallway. Jonah strapped to her chest in his carrier, sleeping soundly. The familiar, safe space felt alien, predatory. She reached her small, windowless office. The donation slips were exactly where she had left them, in a simple cardboard box by the shredder. Her hand was on the lid when a voice spoke from the doorway. Working early, Miss Moreno. Lila spun, her heart leaping into her throat. A man she had never seen before stood there, smiling politely. He was young, dressed in a volunteer's bright orange t-shirt. I'm Evan, the new weekend coordinator. Can I help you with that box? His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright. Lila clutched the box. No, thank you. I'm just grabbing my personal items. Of course, he said, his smile not wavering. He stepped aside. Have a wonderful day. Lila walked past him, her skin crawling. She was halfway down the main hall, almost at the exit, when the fire alarms blared. It was not a bell. It was a piercing electronic screech, and then a hiss from the ceiling. The sprinkler heads exploded. It was not fire, it was water, a cold, sudden deluge. Jonah woke with a terrified scream. The water poured down, soaking her, the box, everything. Lila looked at the box in her arms. The ink on the donation slips, the precious, vital link, was blurring, running, turning to a useless, pulpy blue mush. It was a targeted, brilliant, and simple act of destruction. No! Lila screamed. She shielded the box with her own body, hunching over it, turning her back to the spray. She ripped the tiny rain cover from Jonah's carrier, pulling it over his head. He was screaming, but he was dry. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb and wet. She typed the 2 words, Shore Baron. She heard the front doors of the center burst open, not with a key, but with the sound of splintering wood. Through the curtain of water, she saw two figures, Silas and Mira. They were not in suits, they were in black, tactical gear. Mira was carrying a large, folded object. With a snap of her wrists, she opened it. It was a portable, rigid shield, the kind used for riot control. Silas ran to her, his face a mask of cold fury. He grabbed her, pulling her and the ruined box under the shield Mira held over their heads. "Move!" he roared. They ran as a single unit, a 3-person turtle. Under the pouring water, they burst out into the pre-dawn gray. A black van, disguised as Port Briar florists, was waiting at the curb, its side door sliding open. Silas threw her in. Lila landed on a pile of aromatic damp leaves and plastic-wrapped roses. The door slammed shut, and the van peeled away from the curb, its tires screaming. Lila sat there, soaked to the bone, clutching a box of wet paper pulp. Jonah was still crying. She looked at the ruined evidence in her lap, and a strangled, hysterical sound bubbled up in her throat. She was shaking, she was cold, she was terrified, and she was laughing. Silas stared at her, his chest heaving. "What's so funny?" "You," she said, a real smile breaking through her tears. "You look ridiculous. You smell like roses." She held up the box. "It's ruined. It's all ruined." "Not all of it," Silas said. He reached into his own tactical vest and pulled out a single, damp but legible donation slip. "Evan," he said, "was not as smart as he looked." Lila looked at him, and her laughter softened. She had run into a burning building, and he had run in after her, for the first time in her entire life. She was not alone. Silas's penthouse in the Docklight district was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended high above the city. It should have been sterile, but the entire apartment was filled with the sharp, acidic smell of the harbor, the wind rattling the windows, and the chemical tang of wet paper. Lila had the 12 salvage donation slips spread across the massive granite dining table. She was using a travel hairdryer, which Mira had supplied, on its lowest, coolest setting, patiently trying to dry the fragile paper without destroying the blurred ink. Each slip that became legible was a small victory, a piece of the armor they needed for the morning. Jonah slept peacefully in his cot in the adjoining bedroom, the only island of calm in the city. She heard Silas enter the room. He had showered and changed out of the tactical gear and roses, and was now in a simple, dark sweater and trousers. He looked less like a syndicate boss and more like the man from the restaurant, but his energy was still coiled, a spring wound too tight. He watched her for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Aurelia is expecting the evidence by dawn," Lila said, her voice quiet but firm. She did not look up from her work. "I'll be the one to take it." Silas moved to the other side of the table, his arms crossed. "No, you're not. Mira will handle the drop. You and Jonah will be moved to a new location in 1 hour." Lila snapped the dryer off. The sudden silence was louder than the wind. "This isn't your decision to make, Silas. It's my evidence. It's my community. It's my name on those audit flags. Aurelia needs to hear the testimony from me. It's the only way it holds up." "It's a suicide run," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Rourke is hunting you. He destroyed the evidence because of you. Sending you to that meeting is handing him a victory. I won't do it." "So you'll just handle it?" Her voice was rising, sharp with an exhaustion that went deeper than just one night. "The powerful Mr. Viscari will clean up the mess and keep the little single mother safe in her tower. I am not a piece on your board. Silas." He moved then, his control snapping. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, stopping so close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. His hands were clenched at his sides. "This is not about control, Lila, this is about survival." "I have been surviving my entire life," she cried, her voice finally breaking. "I don't need you to protect me from—" "I'm afraid of losing you." The words roared in the quiet room, seemed to suck the air out of the apartment. They echoed, silencing the wind, silencing her. He had not moved, but he looked shattered, his carefully constructed walls turned to dust. "I am afraid," he repeated, his voice now a raw, ragged whisper. Of losing you. The anger and defiance drained out of Lila, leaving her legs weak. She stared at him. At this man who commanded the city's shadows, his face completely bare, his eyes filled with a desperate, unfamiliar fear that mirrored her own. Her own walls crumbled. I'm afraid, she whispered, her own voice breaking, of trusting the wrong person. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. My whole life has been one bad bet after another. She took the final, small step between them. She laid her hand flat on his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering against her palm, a frantic, wild rhythm. But you're still here. You ran into the water for me. You're still here. That was all it took. His hand came up, covering hers, pressing her palm harder against his chest as if he could anchor himself to her. His other hand rose, cupping her face, his thumb stroking the line of her jaw with a reverence that made her tremble. He looked at her, his dark eyes asking a silent, desperate question. Lila gave her answer. She rose onto her toes, her eyes fluttering shut, and closed the last inch of space. This kiss was not the hesitant, exploratory one from the cliff house. This was a collision. It was the release of every ounce of terror, adrenaline, and buried hope from the last 48 hours. It was desperate and deep, a claiming. His mouth was firm and hot, moving on hers with a hunger that stole her breath. But his hands, the hands of a dangerous man, remained impossibly gentle. One hand cradled her face, his fingers threading into her hair at the temple, the other slid around her waist, pulling her flush against the hard, warm lines of his body. She responded with equal force, her hands clinging to his shoulders, her body molding to his. It was a kiss that spoke of survival, of recognition. His hands began to move, learning the shape of her, tracing the curve of her spine, the line of her shoulder. They were slow, respectful, like a man reading Braille in the dark, finding a language he had forgotten. Each touch was a question. Her answering sigh, a quiet sound in the back of her throat, was a yes. He guided her backward step by step until her back met the cold, floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse window. The city lights of Port Briar smeared into a galaxy of color far below them. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling, fogging a small patch of the glass. I will not let any shadow swallow you, Lila, he whispered, his voice thick and hoarse. Not Rourke's, and not mine, not ever. A small sound, a happy, gurgling sigh, came from the corner of the room where Jonah was stirring in his sleep, turning his head on the mattress. They both froze, the spell shattered, broken by the simple, profound sound of innocence. A second later, a shaky laugh escaped Lila. Silas let out a breathless chuckle, the tension breaking. He pulled back. Though he kept his arms loosely around her waist, he reached for the cashmere throw he had taken from the Seabreak house, the only thing they had salvaged, and wrapped it around her shoulders. He pulled her into the warmth, and she leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heart finally return to a steady, strong rhythm. He rested his chin on the top of her head, his hand smoothing her hair. It was a different kind of intimacy, not passion but peace. It was the feeling of being, for the first time, completely safe. For a long time, they just stood, watching the lights, breathing, but the moment was borrowed. Silas, Lila whispered, he's still out there. The peace vanished. The man holding her became the boss again. I know. He kissed her forehead, a brief, firm press of his lips that was both a promise and a dismissal, and we're going to end it tonight. He moved to the small intercom on the wall. Mira, we're ready. Bring the hardware. A moment later, a private elevator Lila had not noticed opened, and Mira stepped out. She held her rugged laptop. The plan is in motion. The tracker, Silas asked, moving back to the table of evidence. Still active on the hard drive, Mira said, her voice crisp. Rourke is watching this building like a hawk. He thinks he has you cornered. He's waiting for you to make a run for the water, for the paper kite. Good, Silas said. Let him wait. I'm doing better than that, Mira said, a thin, dangerous smile touching her lips. I'm giving him a new target. I've cloned the tracker's signature. In 5 minutes, I'm going to move the signal. I'll send a strong, spoofed decoy, heading fast for Pier 9, straight to one of Rourke's own processing warehouses. Lila looked confused. Why send it to his own warehouse? He doesn't know we know it's his, Silas explained, his eyes cold and sharp. He'll think I am moving my operation there, trying to hide in his own backyard. He'll see it as the ultimate act of arrogance. He won't be able to resist taking me down personally. Mira's smile widened. He will take the bait, and he'll want witnesses for when he catches you. I've already sent an anonymous encrypted tip to the Briar Beacon. They're to meet a high-level source at Pier 9 at 5:30 in the morning for a story that will blow the lid off the FCSB. The trap was set. And Aurelia, Silas asked? She will be there, with her own investigative team, waiting, Mira confirmed. She's the real source the press is meeting. Kellen Rourke, thinking he was the hunter, was preparing to walk onto a stage where he would ambush a ghost signal, intending to frame Silas Viscari in front of the press, only to find the press and the city's highest ethics commissioner waiting for him. The dawn was not a sunrise. It was a slow, gray dilution of the dark. Pier 9 was a graveyard of metal, shrouded in a thick fog that clung to the rusting cranes and dripped from the corrugated steel of the warehouses. The air smelled of low tide, diesel, and decay. Hidden behind a stack of shipping containers, a reporter from the Briar Beacon shivered, his camera lens fogged. Nearby, in a dark sedan, Commissioner Aurelia Quinn sat perfectly still, her small, independent investigation team fanned out, invisible. They were all waiting for the high-level source they had been promised. At precisely 5:30, the heavy rumble of engines cut the silence. 2 black sport utility vehicles and 2 vans, all bearing the official-looking but utterly false insignia of the Federal Commerce Security Bureau, rolled onto the pier. Kellen Rourke stepped from the lead vehicle. He was immaculate in a dark overcoat, his silver hair perfectly combed. He looked like a man arriving to accept an award. He was here to make a very public, very heroic arrest. He's in Warehouse C, Rourke announced to the FCSB captain, his voice carrying clearly in the damp air, pitched perfectly for the press he assumed he had summoned. The tracker is solid. Viscari thinks he's clever, hiding in my own shadow. We take him now. His men fanned out, weapons raised, and right on cue, a figure stepped from the shadows of the warehouse entrance. Silas Viscari. He stood, hands at his sides, bathed in the sickly yellow security light. Rourke smiled, a wide, predatory gesture. Silas, this is a disappointing end. Sloppy. Did you really think you could outrun me? Stealing my files using that pathetic little accountant and her child? He took a step closer, savoring the moment. It's over. I'll be cleaning up your operation and her by breakfast. The figure of Silas did not respond. It just stood, watching. Rourke frowned, sensing the stillness. Move in, take him. As he spoke, the figure of Silas flickered. A line of digital static ran through his chest. He wavered, then dissolved into a cloud of blue pixels. It was a hologram. A tiny, advanced drone hovered where his head had been, then zipped up into the fog. Rourke stared, his mouth open. What? Thank you, Mr. Rourke. Aurelia Quinn's voice boomed over a loudspeaker system. Your confession regarding Miss Moreno was quite clear, and it is all recorded. While this phantom drama played out on the pier, Lila was inside the warehouse. She was not a warrior. She was a mother fueled by a cold, precise fury. Dressed in dark coveralls Mira had given her, she had slipped in through a rear maintenance hatch. She moved past aisles of fish-smelling crates to the back office. The real prize was not the digital file. It was the low-tech backup, the paper ledger, a small, bolted wall safe. She did not have a combination. She had a crowbar. She wrenched the small metal box from the drywall with a groan of metal and plaster, clutching it to her chest. Outside, All pretense of civility was gone. Rourke, realizing he had been played, was screaming at his men. "Find them, find Vascari, find that woman." At that exact moment, new sirens, clearer and sharper, tore through the fog. This time, they were real. A line of Port Briar Organized Crime Directorate squad cars, lights flashing red, white, and blue, screamed onto the pier, cutting off Rourke's escape. The director of the PBOCD, a man Rourke had long considered a business associate, stepped out. "Director," Rourke said, forcing a smile, trying to regain control. "Thank God, Vascari is in that warehouse. He's armed, dangerous. My men and I—" "Shut up, Kellen," the director said, his voice flat with boredom. He walked past Rourke and nodded to Aurelia as she stepped from the shadows. "Commissioner, the perimeter is secure, as you requested." The chessboard had flipped. Rourke saw it all, the Beacon reporter snapping photos, Aurelia's team emerging with recorders, the PBOCD cops calmly handcuffing his FCSB guards. He was finished. His face, usually so composed, twisted into a mask of raw, primal rage. He pulled a heavy silver pistol from the small of his back. "If I'm going down, I'm taking the source," he screamed. He was not aiming at Aurelia or the cops. He was aiming at the warehouse door, where he heard the scrape of metal. "I wouldn't," a calm voice said. The real Silas Vascari stepped out from behind a massive container. Not 40 feet away, he was dressed in the simple sweater from the penthouse. His hands were empty, held slightly away from his body. "It's over, Kellen." Rourke let out a high, ragged laugh. He swung the gun, the heavy barrel finding Silas's chest. "This is the part where you die, Vascari." He squeezed the trigger. A sound split the air, not a boom, but a sharp, high-velocity crack and a metallic whine. High above, on the arm of a loading crane, Mira Dax, prone with a sniper rifle, had fired. She had not aimed for Rourke's chest or head. She had aimed for the gun. The bullet struck the pistol's heavy steel slide with perfect kinetic force. The gun was ripped from Rourke's grasp, shattering into a dozen pieces, spinning through the air in a shower of sparks before splashing into the dark harbor water. Rourke stared at his hand, numb, stinging, and empty. The Beacon reporter's camera flashed, capturing the image the disarmed, astonished crime boss. The warehouse door slid open. Lila, her face smudged with dirt, her hard hat askew, walked out. She was clutching the metal safe. She ignored Rourke, ignored the guns. She walked directly to Aurelia Quinn. "Commissioner," Lila said, her voice shaking but clear as a bell, "I believe this is the second ledger, the one showing the cash donations from Harbor Light, bundled and transferred directly to the mayor's re-election campaign." She handed the heavy box to Aurelia, right in front of the flashing camera. Aurelia Quinn took it. She turned to the press. "The Federal Commerce Security Bureau is a fraudulent entity, a shell for the Rourke outfit," she announced, her voice ringing with cold authority. "My office, in cooperation with the PBOCD, is opening a full-scale public corruption investigation, effective immediately." It was a rout. The PBOCD was arresting the fake FCSB men. The reporter was shouting questions. In the chaos, Rourke did the only thing he could. He ran. He sprinted to the edge of the pier and leaped onto a sleek black speedboat, a fallback he had always kept ready. The engine roared to life, and he shot out into the harbor, disappearing into the fog. Silas was already moving, his instincts screaming. He ran to a Vascari pursuit boat tied to the same pier, a boat Mira had stationed there. He would not let him escape. He jumped in, his hand on the ignition. "Silas?" He stopped. Lila was standing at the edge of the pier. Piper, the nurse, was beside her, holding a bundled, sleeping Jonah. Lila was not shouting, not telling him to stop. She was just watching him, her face pale, her eyes filled with a terrifying, absolute trust. Silas looked at the disappearing speedboat, its white wake fading into the gray. He looked at Lila and at his son. He saw his past and his future. He took his hand off the key. He turned his back on the chase, on the old rules, on the revenge he craved. He stepped off the boat and walked, slowly, then faster, back to his family. The days that followed were a quiet earthquake. Port Briar shook, not with explosions, but with the steady, seismic impact of the truth. The Briar Beacon ran a 7-part series, complete with Lila's leaked ledgers and the reporter's first-hand account from Pier 9. The Harbor Light Foundation was dissolved by the state attorney general's office within 48 hours. The mayor, his political career in ruins and his campaign funds frozen, tendered his resignation, citing personal health concerns. The entire leadership of the fraudulent FCSB was indicted on federal corruption charges. For the first time in a generation, the city of Port Briar was breathing a new, clean air, an air of integrity. It was not without a cost. The Viscari syndicate was, as Silas had known it would be, subjected to a full, top-to-bottom financial investigation. But this was a part of his plan. He did not fight it. He met it. He submitted 2 years' worth of restructuring proposals, financial audits, and applications. He was liquidating his father's shadows, paying the heavy taxes and fines, one by one, to transform an organization into a legitimate, taxable, registered logistics corporation. He was accepting the high price of his past in order to buy, for the first time, a future. Lila, too, returned to her world, but it was not the same one she had left. She went back to the Lantern Key Community Center, not as a part-time accountant, but as an interim member of the new oversight board, her voice the loudest and most respected when it came to building a new, transparent foundation. 3 months later, she used the new community grant, a real one, this time to start a free evening class, Community Accounting for Single Parents. One evening, 6 months after the blind date, the air was warm, the rain a distant memory. The tide in time was quiet for a Tuesday. Silas had reserved the corner booth, their booth. This time, there was no rush, no fear. Lila was laughing as Jonah, now 14 months old and unsteady on his feet, pushed a small wooden duck on wheels across the plush carpet. He was an explorer, brave and loud. He toddled over to Silas, who was watching, not with the sharp gaze of a hawk, but with an open, soft warmth that was now his alone. Jonah babbled, holding the duck up. Silas did not pat his head. He slid out of the booth and knelt on the floor, bringing himself down to Jonah's eye level. "That's a fine piece of logistics, Mr. Chaperone," Silas murmured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out, not a pacifier, but a small, smooth wooden block, beautifully carved. On its side, in deep, clear letters, was one word: family. He offered it to Jonah, who promptly grabbed it and tried to chew on it. Silas laughed, a real easy sound. Then he looked up at Lila. He was still on one knee. It was not a proposal, not in the old-fashioned bended knee way. It was a statement of fact. "Lila," he said, his voice low, for her alone, "I will be signing the last of the incorporation papers on Friday. It's done. I will sign everything for the rest of my life that I need to sign to be legitimate. I will be at every parent-teacher meeting. I will be the one who makes breakfast on the days you are tired, and the one who knows how to test the bottle, even when he is 3. He took her hand, his thumb stroking her palm. "If you will agree, let's build a house, one with windows that look out at the sea and windows that look at each other." Lila was crying, but she was smiling. The tears warm and clean. They were not tears of fear or of loneliness. They were tears of arrival. She slid her hand from his grasp, only to place it flat against his chest, feeling the steady, calm, and peaceful beat of his heart. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, but we keep one rule, the one I gave you on the hill." "No more lies," he said, his voice a solemn vow. "We tell the truth," she corrected, her smile widening. "Even when it's hard, even when it makes it easy to lose each other, we always tell the truth." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. He wrapped his arms around her, and she wrapped hers around him. Jonah, seeing his 2 favorite people hugging, let out a shriek of delight and clapped his small hands. Silas kissed her. It was not the kiss of the cliff, Or the desperate kiss of the penthouse? It was a kiss that was deep and slow and respectful, a confirmation of the promise. It was the kiss of the path with all the lights on. At the entrance to the restaurant, Mira Dax watched for a brief second. She turned to the hostess. He said to hold all his calls. She adjusted her blazer and looked out at the city street. The lights are all hung, she muttered to herself. As for the state's business, I'll handle that. She walked out into the night, a guardian at the gate. Port Briar did not change all at once. It was not a fairy tale, but it was a city where people were now fighting for the light. Lila, held securely in Silas's arms, looked over his shoulder at her son, who was now trying to fit the family block into the duck's wheel. She leaned back, her forehead resting against Silas's, and whispered, "From one late blind date, son, we found a whole harbor." Weeks later, in a sterile, high-rise boardroom, Silas Vascari held a heavy, expensive pen. Before him was the final, binding document, the one that legally dissolved the last of his father's illicit shell companies, ceding the assets to the city's redevelopment fund. He signed his name, the ink a dark, permanent blue, across the city at that exact moment. The city council voted aye on a new port initiative. Silas had chosen. He had chosen love. He had chosen the future. He had chosen his family. He left the boardroom, the weight of his past finally lifted, and walked out into a new, bright dawn, where Lila and Jonah were waiting for him. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, and give this video a like. If you really enjoyed it, please support us by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people. We'll see you next time.